Welcome back. In a moment, we'll examine the way that political parties are using our data on social media. But first, here are some other stories to keep an eye on. Taiwan's top court has ruled that the country's laws prohibiting gay marriage are in violation of the Constitution. It's a landmark ruling that could pave the way for the legalization of gay marriage on the island, which would be the first place in Asia to legalize same-sex union. The president of the Philippines has declared martial law on the southern Filipino island of Mindanao. President Duterte's announcement follows the deaths of 2 soldiers and a policeman who were killed in clashes with Islamist fighters. And Indigenous Australians are meeting at the country's sacred landmark, Uluru, to decide how Aborigines should be recognized in the Australian Constitution. This week's conference comes ahead of a national referendum aimed at addressing the growing social isolation faced by Indigenous Australians. Earlier in the program, we talked about political art. Now let's move on to some political science. While every democratic election in every country is a little bit different, there is one ingredient for victory, and that remains the same: votes. From America last year and across Europe this year, political parties are finding new ways of influencing voters. Here's Insight's Chloe Culpen.
Social media may seem like a bit of fun between friends and family, but all the information we provide says a lot about us. Where we go, what we do, what we like. Professor of Politics Justin Fisher says data from what we click like on and which stories we share are used to identify which issues are important to us.
Facebook is often rich in information in terms of the things that people like, the other people that they follow, and so on and so forth. So it gives a broader picture of the voter. It can personalise the message that a party sends to an individual voter.
Data from Facebook is particularly useful for political parties because it's used by people of all ages. And the more a party spends, the more information they receive.
One of the things about Facebook is that a lot of older people use it to keep in touch with their grandchildren. So unlike many other social media, it's pan-generational.
While some argue elections can be won and lost online, research shows face-to-face contact is the most powerful tool. A fact which wasn't lost on France's newly elected President Macron, together with Angela Merkel, who is currently campaigning to keep power in the upcoming German election in September. Still, targeted online campaigns are exceptionally powerful, and unlike those on television, are totally unregulated.
I think it will be very difficult to regulate the online activity in the same way that we regulate broadcasting. And that's because a lot of the time, the software, the online sites are outside of the United Kingdom. It's very difficult for one country's legislation to extend beyond its shores.
Research also shows in most countries there are now far fewer strong party loyalists compared with previous years. And because parties cannot rely on their core support anymore, winning over undecided voters is more likely to be the key to winning elections, whether that's on or offline. Chloe Culpen reporting for Insight.
Jane Singer, who is a professor of journalism innovation, who researches in the sociology of digital new works. Jane, welcome.
Thank you very much.
Journalism is tough enough now. We have innovative journalism, and it seems to be a runaway train right now, at a fast-moving one. Let's talk about the American election. I mean, most of Trump's $250 million in fundraising came from social media outreach. They were running 40 to 50,000 ads per day socially, and around the debates, about 170,000 ads. That's a very big bit of penetration on social media.
Absolutely, it's vast, and it's very inexpensive. You can do it very cost effectively, and more important to them, you can do it in a very, very targeted way. So you can know a lot about who you're reaching and tailor the best message to reach a particular voter. So different voters will be seeing very different messages, unlike broadcast advertising.
So here's the deal with the Trump election, that they say that the takeaway wasn't that social media was kind of a leftover after you ran your campaign ads in newspapers and TV. It was the main course of his campaign. It won it for him.
Well, it's hard to say what actually won it for him, but he certainly used it very effectively, yes.
He used Twitter a lot.
Direct
outreach, and he continues to use it to win what, I'm not sure.
Indeed.
But why was it so important, the way he used Twitter?
Well, I think people felt that they were interacting with him in a way, or with the candidate, or with the, perhaps with the issues, to the extent that he foregrounded issues, in a way that they wouldn't on traditional media. So in traditional media, you're just providing information to a mass, kind of undifferentiated audience, and we all see the same thing. Twitter's a much more, and Facebook as well, much more engaging format. So I think that creates a relationship that was beneficial to him, yes.
It was direct. People thought he was talking to them. So, I mean, there is a crisis, though, that feeds that, isn't it? That there is a crisis in confidence in mainstream media. I mean, the statistics, I don't know what they are in Europe, but in the U.S., 1 in 4 trust mainstream media now. That's not very good.
No, and in fact, there's been a lot of global research around the world that there's a huge crisis in institutions in general and in media in particular. So it's not just a U.S. trend, it's everywhere.
So for a price, Facebook allows data from your page on your age, your occupation, your interests, your friendship networks, your sexuality. I mean, apparently all of that is up for sale.
And also what else you do online. So it's not only what you do, my understanding at least. I'm not an expert in what goes on behind the scenes, but my understanding is that it's not only what you're doing on Facebook, on their platform, it's what you're doing as a digital user in general.
It doesn't matter what my privacy settings are. That data is there, and they will sell it, according to many analysts.
Yes. Again, I'm not an expert on the way it works behind the scenes, but your privacy settings largely they relate to a variety of things. Some of them are what other people can see, different from what Facebook can see. Right.
So you have a crisis of confidence in mainstream media. You have the people communicating through social media. It has become sort of the main vehicle, right? The question is, how are political parties now tapping into that? And they're tapping it into a very, very big way that people don't understand.
Yes, and I think that's really important to emphasize, that we don't really see what's happening and we don't really understand what's happening in all of us. And no matter how educated and sophisticated we are, we can't really see what's happening with those algorithms behind the scenes. We can't really see what information is coming from bots and what information is coming from human beings. We really can't tell. Some interesting reporting being done about the use of social media by British politicians in the run-up to the general election that's coming up. Here, they're using it extensively, and again, different people are seeing different things. So you may see thousands, maybe millions of people may see advertising that other millions of people never see at all. So it's very hard to kind of oversee that or assess it because we don't even see it.
I have to come back to the fact that you keep saying we don't really know.
Yeah.
But the fact is that how that data is being used and sold is not publicly discussed very much by the providers. And that raises some pretty big questions.
Absolutely. No, that's absolutely correct. We don't see that. They're not accountable in the ways that more traditional media are accountable. I will say they are trying in various ways. They seem to be trying to do some things within their platform that will address some of these issues.
What's micro-targeting?
How effective that is.
What's micro-targeting?
Well, micro-targeting is kind of what we've been talking about. It's tailoring information that will be specific to you, your interests, your habits, your background, whatever we know about you. That's micro-targeting.
How would that help a political party, for instance? I mean, would they say, okay, Dana Lewis doesn't like this, likes that? I mean, they're saying, by the way, that if you have something like 10 likes, they can build a political profile about you.
Yes, that's what. Yes, I've read that.
Obviously, the more they have, the
right.
grander
right.
the sketch becomes.
Right.
But how does that help somebody who's out canvassing on the street? They're able to actually use an app and access that data and say, is it worth knocking on Dana's door? Or Jane's door?
Absolutely. Yes, it helps them know that. It also helps them to know when they've knocked what they should talk about. So do you care most about healthcare? Do you care most about immigration? Do you care most about whatever it might be? Well, they've got talking points to a whole range of issues, but they can, the micro-targeting can help them understand what will push your buttons. And of course, that's very valuable to them.
And huge, I mean, we're not talking about a few people, we're talking millions and millions of profiles in the United States were provided to the Trump campaign. For instance, Hillary Clinton's campaign also used it.
Yes, and I think that's kind of the way politics is being done now. Yes, it's not just in the U.S. Certainly it was effective for Trump. And I guess the follow-up question is, well, what's the antidote to that? And I think that a couple of antidotes. One is just kind of being savvy citizens and savvy consumers and understand that that is happening. And realize that that's what's going on. And another
it's very manipulative.
Interesting too. It's very I personally think it's very manipulative. Another very interesting thing that's happening in response to that is the rise of fact checkers and the rise of people who are skilled at gathering information and at verifying it, putting that information out. So there is some pushback.
It's manipulative in the sense that you are reading messages potentially from a campaign and you don't really realize where it's coming from.
Yes, that's true.
And fact-checking, for instance, in the Trump campaign, there was a lot of fake news that went out. One of them was that the Pope endorsed him, and that went out to tens of millions of people.
Mm-hmm. And it was repeatedly shown to be untrue and didn't really matter. So that's why, it has to be a combination of having verifiable, correct, factual information out there and us being receptive to it and understanding what we're looking at.
I'm not the first one to ask you in media, but it seems like a crisis for us is that there is no open conversation or balanced conversation that's taking place in digital media. It's an echo chamber over and over again where people go, solicit the views that they want to hear, and now you have things like Facebook and Twitter, which now reach out to them and feed them what they think they want to hear all the time. So
yes.
it's not an open medium to some extent.
Yes, that's correct. And again, that is why we as news consumers have to kind of up our game, right? So we need to be able to understand which sources are trustworthy and which are not. We need to understand how the feeds that we get are being targeted to us and which ones are not. Because they're not all being targeted. The Guardian and the Times and the BBC put out information, and that's trustworthy information that's available to all of us.
Good advice. Be a smart news consumer.
Be a smart news consumer is excellent advice, always.
Jane Singer, thanks for coming in and talking to us.
Thanks so much for having me.
We end with our Inside Bite, and today we can bring you a new hotel with a twist opening at New York's JFK Airport. It's being built in the old Trans World Airlines terminal, which was dubbed the Grand Central of the Jet Age. It was cutting edge when it was built in the 1960s, and the designers say they hope to restore the futuristic-looking terminal to its original 1962 design, and that's complete with elevated footbridge and old clocks hanging from the ceiling. The terminal was an aesthetic and commercial success for decades until the early 2000s, when TWA was sold to American Airlines. That's all for now. I'm Dana Lewis, and that was Insight.